Hello and welcome back to another Death Count gaming video. Today I will be reviewing Spider-Man on the PS1, a game that I have just currently beaten on my recent Death Count gaming videos. Unlike the average review, I actually rate games a bit differently. I judge the game into 5 categories and give each a score out of 10, and after each category gets a score, I take all the scores and get an average on how good the game truly is. These categories are Story, Difficulty, Graphics, Gameplay, and my personal opinion on how good I think the game is. Now that you know the system and each category, let's begin the review. Spider-Man is a game about Peter Parker living out his time as Spider-Man. At the beginning of the game, Spider-Man is framed for a robbery that takes place at a convention center Dr. Octavius is hosting. Peter Parker is actually in the crowd when all of this takes place. The imposter then gets away as the crowd panics, trapping Peter from doing anything to stop the imposter. This pretty much kicks the entire story off, with the police thinking Spider-Man is the villain, and a whole host of villains using this event to raise havoc in the city. A master plan is then unhatched, taking place, with the whole city then covered in a thick fog of some kind. As the story unfolds, a lot happens, and though I didn't really care for it when I was younger, I find the story now easily told and easy to follow. There are some things that happen in the game that just don't make sense at all, like when Peter's boss calls Peter Parker and tells him to call the cops, because he was getting attacked by, I think it was Venom? Why didn't he just call the cops himself? It just does not make sense. It's things like this that I just find stupid and completely weird. These things are just littered throughout the entire story here and there, but you don't really notice it until you actually think about it. Overall, I think the entire story was well told, which is why I will actually give the game a score of 8 out of 10 for story. Graphically, I think this game is pretty decent, and is visually appealing even after 17 years of being released. Each character is somewhat clear as to who they're meant to represent in the game, especially Spider-Man and the other villains he faces. But the main thing I find odd out of all of this is why the characters don't move their mouths as they talk, only displaying a painted on face. This was clear in a lot of scenes as the camera was zoomed on their face. Besides this small detail, the characters' movements were realistic, and I really don't have much more to complain about this. The way Spider-Man swung also looked kind of awesome, even though the webs shot into the sky and hooked into nothing in the beginning levels. This was only a problem in the first quarter of the game though, not really a big issue. Even the cutscenes were well created, and with this, the cutscenes were graphically, well, they looked really good. So I really have nothing to complain about even with the cutscenes. The graphics aren't much to write home about, but I believe they still look good even after all this time. So for graphics, I'm going to give the game a 7 out of 10. Difficulty wise, this game wasn't really difficult at all. As I found out, the challenge comes later in the game, with harder enemies emerging later, in turn making the game more difficult later on as well. Even still, with the bosses, I faced a fair amount of resistance as well, as I pummeled each boss to a mostly swift defeat. Sure, I died in this game, but for the most part, it was sort of an easy game to master. I also realized that I chose the easy difficulty, and I know there's a kids mode as well, which would obviously be easier than easy, if you understand what I'm trying to say. So I won't criticize it for being too easy. There was some challenge in the game, but I wanted it to be more difficult for an easy stage, which is why there are 2 more higher difficulty for those with the same taste that I have for this game. With all of this in mind, I can only really give it a minimum score of 5 out of 10 for difficulty. As for the gameplay, the controls are simple and easy to learn. The game teaches you the controls head on for the most part on Mission 1, making it a breeze to learn and get accustomed to. It also introduces mechanics later on, but all of these are accessible throughout the entire game, so there's no block on if you can do these or not. Control-wise, it has the same controls as any other fighting game, so it's quick and easy to get into as well. The fighting is also simplistic, with punching, kicking, and web slinging being used to progress through the game and attack each enemy. I wish there was more elaborate combo system for the attacks, but I think what is here is actually pretty good. I also wish there was a more openness for the levels, but I also think what's here is good as well. Everything was responsive and the fighting was also well put together. Even the enemies had good pacing and were well positioned throughout the game. More enemies would have made the game harder, but I still think the level of enemies where they were was pretty decent, pretty good. There's even a comic hunt if you wish to try and find them all in the game, which gives you certain rewards for finding them. But this is all optional, you don't have to find them to progress through the game. It's all choice based, it's good. So there's that as well if you want to do that. Overall, the game was well put together, I think. So I'm going to give the game a 7 out of 10 for gameplay. Personally, I really enjoyed playing this game again from my childhood. I really liked this game, however, as I'm older, there are a few things strange, like the music. Everything is good for the most part, except for some stages with annoying music that just seems to repeat over and over and over again. I don't know if I just overlooked that, but I certainly notice it now. On top of this, there are also strange bits of the story that just don't make sense, like the boss call I mentioned earlier. But this is just one example. The others are they're way smaller than this, but that's the main example. However, all of this can actually be overlooked, and I really like the game a lot even still. It's fun to play, it's enjoyable. The story's actually pretty good. So, with all of this in mind, this is why I personally will give the game an 8 out of 10 in my opinion. In general, what we have here is an enjoyable game for any age or fan of Spider-Man to play. The game controls well, has a clear story that kind of ruins the villain at the beginning of the game, has clearly recognizable characters that also control well, and also has a variety of villains and heroes thrown in the game as well, all being involved in the story in some way. Everything just fits together here in the game, but I don't believe it fits as well as it once did. So, even throughout all this is why I really personally why the game gets a score out of 7 out of 10. And in case you missed my gameplay videos, I fared a total of 8 deaths in the hour and 41 minutes it took for me to beat the game. And if you want to check out my 11-part series I did on the game, I would be very grateful. Otherwise, thank you for watching my review, and I will see you again in the next video. Until then, have a nice day everyone, and I'll see you again next time.
How am I supposed to know you're the real Daredevil? What?